Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth in Motion Studios, and I now call it Unpack Cultage because that's what we're here to do. We are thinking about experiences that are pertaining spiritual abuse, and that's what I call things that we walk away with, that baggage, that cultage that we received in our harmful communities or churches. And my channel is all about thinking about these things, talking about these things, processing them together out loud. So in case you are completely new to my channel, I have been doing this for 6 years. I've kind of been taking a break now for a while to focus on my studies. I got a degree in school administration. I kind of focused on my family and all that. So I was highly inspired to come and address you again and share some thoughts I've had that I haven't shared on this channel before. So in case also you care, 6 years ago, I had this idea of telling my story as it had happened until 6 years ago, and also share with an unknown audience some authors that have helped me tremendously kind of get into a better place, understand better what happened to me, and ultimately feel like I had overcome some major problems that I lived with ever since I got kicked out of my faith group. I wanted to also point out that I'm not a psychologist. I am a teacher by trade and a fitness trainer, but I have spent a lot of time in research and in self-help, if you will, and also therapy. So I'm sharing a lot of resources and thoughts that I have found helpful. So I'm not diagnosing anything. I'm just sharing what has been useful on my path of unpacking cultage, of taking things out of that backpack of trauma, of negative experiences, also of memories, simply memories, and then process them out loud, unpacking it with people, with myself, with my husband, with a therapist, with a pastor, with many people. And then you can check out my channel to see lots of those conversations. Today, I want to address whistleblower trauma. And why am I doing that? So I just was in Germany and I had a conversation with an old friend, and she disclosed something that I was really surprised by. She had in the recent past been in a place of employment where she became a whistleblower, not just on her behalf, but also on behalf of other people. And then while it ultimately led to someone being fired, she was resettled. She was supposed to, from then on, start working somewhere else. And the people that she stood up for all retracted what they had said initially. So she kind of stood there by herself, looking like a rebel without a cause. And that was something that inspired me deeply because it feels so very relatable to what I hear a lot from people who have been in abusive situations and abusive relationships, be it spiritual or not, that they felt they stood up for other people, including themselves probably, and then got punished ultimately for it, and really were left with their head spinning. And it really threw them and me into a severe season of questioning everything. Now, today I want to cast a vision of that those experiences are ultimately something that can help you. I'm not saying we need to experience these things to become who we're supposed to be, or that's God's way of telling us He loves us. It is just something that is part of our human experience. And I think anything that helps us, that inspires us to think about our own values, like do an introspection of where we're at, our motives, where we want to be, and so forth, how we relate to the world. Those things are potentially valuable. Okay, so today I will share at first experience that I had when I was 13. That was 1996, and I'm actually sharing this story with a little bit of fear because I've never talked about it on camera because it is a very difficult story, but it's almost 30 years ago. So 1996, now it's 24. So it's been a while, almost 30 years. And I think the people involved are retired by now, and nobody can get back to me and get me into trouble for saying this on camera. And I'm not mentioning names as always. Also, I'm not representing any organization, just I should say that as a disclaimer. So when I was 13, we had a trip with our class, that was 6th grade at the end of the school year, to a place, and we stayed there for a week. And long story short, some kids went to a museum, other kids went to a pool with our main teacher. And once we all came back together, all the people who were at the pool, almost all the kids, we're talking about 6th graders, me being a 6th grader, told me that they had been inappropriately touched by the teacher. Now, my father was a prosecutor, and I was one of those kids that felt the charge to save everybody. I had a savior complex. I thought that was what I was called to do. My fundamentalist upbringing didn't help. I felt I literally needed to make sure that people wouldn't go to hell. And also, I thought, since my father is a prosecutor, I have an insight into what is fair, what is just, what needs to be done. So at that time in the museum, nothing really happened, but they told me the girls were like, oh, they touched me. And then the boys were like, yeah, I saw it. It was so bad. And lo and behold, the whole story, once we were back at home, once we were back in the school, changed to me, that I had made this up, that I had come up in my imagination and my boredom, whatever, with the idea that the teacher had molested girls in the pool. And that was an incredibly traumatic experience. And I want to call that whistleblower trauma. And we'll unpack this a little bit more, and then transfer that to church experiences or faith group experiences. That night when I came back from that trip, I remember sitting in my father's office up in our house, and I told him everything, and he said, stay out of it, kid, stay out of it. And I heard him, and I thought, okay, I guess that's good. But the next day, or the next Monday, I should say, I didn't think I was getting involved when I told the school secretary, who was really a kind soul that I love to visit every day. So I told her when she was like, well, how was your trip? I was like, yeah, the girl said that, or the teacher molested them. Of course, the principal heard it. And so then it turned into this where all the girls were, I was first, you know, like, who said that, and what were you thinking, and what happened? And then it turned into the girls saying, oh, this actually didn't happen. And I ended up having to apologize to this teacher for saying these things, that I was just incredibly confused, because I was told by my friends, my classmates, this thing, and I just believed them. I didn't want it to be true. It wasn't like I hated this man and I retaliated or anything. I actually enjoyed him very much as a content teacher. So it was a very difficult experience. And then what I want to focus on is the long-term consequence of this. My parents didn't have the foresight to put me into therapy or to have me change schools or anything. I got to stay in that group of people mostly for years to come. And you have to imagine that I went back to specific kids and I was like, you said this and that. And then they were saying to me, I didn't say that. And all I had literally told the kids to do was, you have to tell your parents. You have to tell your parents. And so I wasn't like, you have to go to the police or anything. All I said to them is, tell your parents. And me mentioning it to the secretary, that was the opposite of staying out of it. But in my mind, I was just sharing it with the school secretary. So the insanity that occurred that summer, because that was the end of the school year, that summer in my mind was pretty memorable. Before I go any deeper into how this relates to spiritual abuse, I wanted to share with you what a whistleblower per our government actually is. And I'm quoting from the Office of Inspector General. That's a government website. They're saying the function of a whistleblower is they perform an important service by reporting what they reasonably believe to be evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, or mismanagement. Okay, so what they reasonably believe to be evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, or mismanagement. In America, whistleblowers are protected. And the idea is it is a service to bring information to a higher authority with the intent to reveal truth because of the reasonable belief that there's something wrong going on. I don't claim to understand any more about that, but we've all heard the term whistleblower, and that's the idea. Now, what is trauma? Why am I saying whistleblower trauma? I am currently working through this book here. It's called Trauma in the Pews by Janyne Mcconnaughey, and Trauma in the Pews. I will reach out to her probably at some point, ask her to have a conversation with me. And she has a bit wider of a trauma definition. It's actually a page long. I won't read the whole page to you, but she is saying that trauma is often more about how an event is processed than the event itself. So now I'm adding to what she's saying. In a way, trauma, in my case, I could have said to myself, oh, we're sixth graders. The hormones are flying high. We don't know what we're doing. It was stupid. I should have stayed out of it. But that's not how rationally I was thinking. I was feeling much more than I was thinking. The way it was processed was that this was the end of my life. I might as well die because I lost trust in the people that I was supposed to hang out with every day. And in Germany, where I went to school, you have the same group for the entire day. So you're not seeing different people, it's the same group. And being lied to and being stabbed in the back, that's what it felt like that. I did not know how to handle that. And then on top of that, I got into trouble at home. My parents were so disappointed, and I don't know what was shared with my grandma, but I remember her saying to me that she's so disappointed in me that I would be saying those kinds of things. And I remember when she said that to me, I had no idea what to do. That summer I had nightmares. It set me up for becoming disassociated from myself, if you will. It set me up for questioning everything and not learning anything from that experience. I didn't walk away thinking, okay, so the next time someone tells me something, I need to maybe not literally get involved and, I don't know, not tell anyone. It was so difficult, so complex and confusing to experience this that I stayed with a spinning head for years to come. And that's why I actually told this story to multiple people over the years, and they're always so shocked. And what I find so shocking looking back is that I didn't receive any help to deal with it. So that's another reason why I have this channel, because I don't want people to go through that, being kicked out of a group, being currently maybe in a group where something abusive is happening to you, and you're just wondering what the heck is going on. Nowadays, I think there are quite a few resources online, many people that are addressing this topic. So there's help out there now. I'm just adding my perspective to the whole mix. So here's going back to Janyne's definition. When considering the effects of trauma, it is helpful to think of a traumatic event as anything that causes an individual to feel threatened emotionally or physically, feel powerless, and or affect their capacity to cope while overwhelmed. The age of an individual at the time of the trauma is also an important factor in their ability to cope. So again, this is a wider definition, and I think it is very appropriate. Trauma is a Greek word, and it essentially means impact. Some translate it with wound. To me, impact makes a lot of sense, because when you get punched in the face, you might not have a wound, but you certainly have an impact, right? You'll have a bruise. It has impacted you in a way that might be easy for you to shake off. That's perfectly possible. But again, the way you process it, the story you tell yourself about what happened, affects how long this will stay with you and what you end up believing about yourself and other people, the world, God, as a result. So whistleblower trauma is exactly this in my mind, and I'm not saying that this is a term I learned in psychology. I'm coining this myself, maybe not. It makes perfect sense to me to put these two terms together and to say this is what many people experience in faith situation, in faith communities where some abuse is happening of any kind, and the one person feels the need to bring it up, to share it. Now, depending on the organization, like when you think of more like the Catholic Church, like an official church where there's hierarchies, there should be, in theory, safety in the fact that there is hierarchy. So every person that's on a certain top of the room ceiling should have someone above them. And if you have a problem with that person that you can't handle with them, you should be able to go to their superior and so forth, right? In theory, that's a great thought. And we know how well this works. But so in theory, you should be able to report abuse that you, what was the word that you reasonably believe to be evidenced by you that there's abuse or some kind of mismanagement, fraud going on. Now, I can only speak from the experience of being a whistleblower on behalf of my group, myself, and then bringing that to the leadership. In that sense, blowing the whistle into the ear of the leaders and being like, hey, do you notice what you're doing? We all notice, we're all harmed here. And this needs to be addressed. So we have learned in my group very early on that that is just not something that you do, because you get into trouble. And at first, I think when we started as a group, it was kind of non-denominational, you know, now I call it evangelical, though there were more faith, more like self-help psychology and whatnot thought in the whole mix. We formed as a group that stood together like that for a few years, but then people would always be chopped off. People would be told to leave. They would be kicked out, and that was the ultimate punishment. And they wouldn't just be kicked out, they would be demonized. And that was the ultimate punishment, shunned, in other words, but not just don't have any contact with them. It more like get rid of everything you have that they gave you, or like if you have a book of theirs, get it out of the house. They are so evil that you need to stay away from them. So the punishment for people speaking up eventually became being kicked out and condemned to hell. That's just it, condemned to hell. Now, it's one thing to see, witness that happening to other people. You feel bad, you're shocked, oh. But when you're the one that's chopped off, that's being demonized, that's being condemned to hell, so being told by people that you trusted because they earned somehow your spiritual trust, that now in the eyes of God, you are not savable anymore because of this thing that you've done, and because of this attitude that you have. In other words, if you were to say, oh, I don't mean that you guys are false shepherd and you're really dangerous and you're called to actually help people, but you're actually feeding off of them and making their lives worse and your lives enrich of their things that you take from them. So really the opposite of selfless care, what you would expect from a Christian shepherd, a Christian pastor or leader, that unless you change your opinion, you are now, probably going to hell, probably. So when you find yourself to be that person, when I found myself to be that person, it was, again, a spinning head. It was the carpet pulled from under the rug, and I have other videos where I talk about that experience more. But today I would like to focus on what happens to you, or what happens to me, what happened to me when I stood up for what I believed in, my values, what I didn't want to be true but couldn't help but see to be true, and then get condemned for it. That's what I want to call whistleblower trauma. Now, if something like that happened to me today, where I was part of a group and I would be like, hey, you guys, sorry, but I'm noticing this thing, this really needs to be addressed. And then they would say, oh, I think you don't really belong into this group. This is just, how we run things here. You can leave now. You're clearly not the right material for us. I would be able to not shrug it off, but I would be able to process it and put it into a context of, I understand now. What is so confusing, what is so earth-shattering to oneself, this was also testified by my friend who was sharing the aftermath of getting basically reassigned to a different position that she didn't want. She didn't want to be in a different place, and she also didn't want to be the one person who saw the problem, because other people saw the problem too, and they had a lot of conversations, and then suddenly they all bowed out. What happened to her and me, and what I see on social media when people share how shocking this is, we end up questioning ourselves. And I can guarantee you that the people who get ultimately punished are the ones who will do the soul searching, and the ones who should do a lot of soul searching too are not doing that, because they have already placed themselves either in some kind of a spiritual explanation that they're like better, or God would himself or herself or themselves, God would directly criticize them or correct them, not through some measly sheep that they're in charge of, so that they're beyond touching. And this would be more like an attack. It would be an attack if someone calls you that, like a bad shepherd, because that is just not something that fits into your narrative that you have created. That made you ultimately a toxic, very dangerous person to be avoided. So it is the person who gets kicked out that has a wonderful opportunity to really go deep and introspectively say, what the heck just happened? I have actually tried to help, ultimately the group, help the leadership too by pointing out an issue, but the consequence was dire, and now God apparently finds me unacceptable. It's kind of a problem to a person who believes that, right? If you don't believe that the leaders have the power to condemn you to hell, then they have no power over you, right? Then you could just be like, too bad. I'm clearly not in the right place here, because I will not subscribe to this kind of negative treatment. I don't deserve that. I don't see that this represents God. It doesn't align with my values, right? Something like that. But us people who are really sold out to a group, to a mission, to a purpose, to specific leaders, we take those words very seriously. And since both can't be true, right? both can't be true at the same time. That I was right with what I saw and said, this is a problem, you need to look at this. And they are right by saying, it's not a problem, you're the problem. You have a huge problem now because God has a problem with you, right? Both can't be true at once. So this is where we have to think, who do I actually believe? I don't know the answer to that, but for me, ultimately, after the shock of being kicked out from a group that I had sacrificed, when I say years, like 2, that's one thing, but the things I did for them, the fool I made of myself, the harm I caused in my family because of obedience and loyalty to them, all these things were, this is where the sunk cost fallacy comes to play. I could have said, after all this that I have invested, I should trust them again. I should die to myself and should say, I must have been wrong in my perception, or I don't know, if maybe I was right in the way I perceived it, but if they say it's not a problem, then I've done my part. And then I can say, you're right. I trust you fully. You're my leader. You could easily say, sure, I was wrong in thinking it was that big of a deal. I want things to go back to how they were. I used to be so happy in this group. I'm just gonna move on. But that I didn't do. And I didn't do that because I can't say it any other way. It felt wrong to go against what I sensed so very strongly, what I couldn't unsee, what had been building up in me for months and maybe even years. And then I finally said it, and it wasn't just me. My husband was a big, big part of that as well. It was impossible for me, honestly, to go back against my perception and say, I guess you're right. No, I was like, I think I rather now go into this wilderness, into this desert of not understanding what the heck happened, than ever have you guys be leaders in my existence in any shape or form. That's just it. That was my initial response. And then long term, it turned into a unpacking that over the years to come and realizing really that the values I had and their values didn't match. It was not congruent. It was not a group that could work because they believed in enriching themselves. They believed in building their own kingdom. They believed they were infallible. They believed in a version of God that I cannot, in good faith, accept ever again. There's many reasons why, but their values and my values didn't match up. And addressing this trauma, this impact, this, I would call it more like a gut punch, this gut punch that I lived with for years, ultimately was good for me because it strengthened me. Now, here's the thing. Well, how did it strengthen me? It strengthened me to say, there are things that are very difficult to unsee when you have seen them. And then it's better to address them and take the consequence than be like, I don't hear it, I don't see it, I won't speak about it. So in that sense, I was strengthened as a person who has values and speaks up when I see abuse occur right in front of me. It has also strengthened me because I have considered that maybe I was wrong. Reasonably believing, right, in the evidence of abuse, mismanagement, fraud. They did all those things. They defrauded us from our money, right? They used the money that was supposed to go to specific things for their own, for themselves. Like they were clearly bad people in their actions, but I was the one who still considered maybe I was wrong. And I think that experience also, that way of thinking also made me stronger, because maybe I could be wrong when I perceive a problem and I'm like, hey, what just happened here? And I consider myself very sensitive to dynamics in groups, in little things that just, I consider myself to be very sensitive. But am I infallible? No, I'm not. I can be wrong. And that's okay, right? Does that mean I shouldn't speak up anymore? Maybe when I speak up, I should say more like, maybe the way I present what I have a problem with, or what I'm thinking, I'm perceiving as a problem, maybe that I could do differently. But either someone is willing to be criticized, someone is open, approachable, someone who actually is about serving people, right? Either that person has that attitude or they don't. If someone doesn't want to hear negative feedback, no matter how beautifully it is said, it will be ultimately rejected, right? So yes, I can be wrong. Yes, the way it was said can be bad or like imperfect. It can be messy, just like human conflict tends to be messy, and it can still be necessary to say something, because in a safe relationship, it is safe to say, hey, this is something that I have a problem with. A very simple example, I have a friend, my best friend, she is short. And so after probably 10 years of us being super close, she was like, hey, do you kind of think that short people are less than? And I was so grateful she said that, because I could address that. She kind of thought that I made jokes about short people. I tend to be taller than, I'm not like super, I'm 5'8", right? But so, and I could say, I think I've been making jokes that could look like that, but I am not, like, I don't consciously believe that short people are less than. So it was important for her to say that, so that I could think about the impact of some jokes I've made on her behalf, being short and me being tall and whatnot, and clarify myself. I consider that being a safe person. Now, with a not safe person, when something like that is brought up and they're questioned and there's negative critique or something, you will get a different result. Go try it yourself. And ultimately, this made our friendship stronger, because whatever that question in her mind was, we could address it. So that brings me to the conclusion of today's addressing whistleblower trauma. Know that the traumatized person, the person that spoke up for what they believed in, is going to be in a season of a spinning head, a spinning reality of being confused about, I did the right thing. Why did people abandon me in the process? And why was I kicked out for it? Why was I made the rebel without a cause when I clearly had a cause? Was I maybe wrong? Maybe you were. If that's the conclusion you come to, that's okay. Then come to that conclusion and move on. Or say, I think I was right. I would actually do the same thing again because I feel so strongly about this thing. There isn't a absolution that you get just for speaking up, right? Maybe what you notice is right and maybe what you notice is wrong. Essentially, in the settings that we're talking about, spiritually abusive settings, I hope you have people around you that you can process this with, and that people can help you see that you were acting in accordance with your values, and that is the power that you have to not let someone tell you to go against your values. And ultimately, that is the greatest charge that I have against my spiritual leaders, that they made me do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise, saying God needs me to do this. So I acted against my values because of them and their bad leadership, right? So this season of wrestling with the reality of being punished is precious. It's not beautiful or happy, but it is precious because I think it can lead to growth. It can lead to more empathy for other people who might come to you and have messy criticism of you, but in the content and the thing that they're bringing to you, they actually might have a point that needs to be looked at. And it might lead to being, I don't want to say less sure of yourself, because I think people who were in fundamentalist faith groups, like I was raised and then got more extreme in a special front runner group, I was sure of myself when I acted with the blessing of the leader. I wasn't sure of myself outside of that. If I felt, what would the leader do? And I would be like, yeah, this is what he would do. Then I was incredibly cocky, arrogant, better than anyone else. But there was no substance to it. It didn't have to do with me and what I believed. So I think the season of processing whistleblower trauma can have that effect, that you come to yourself, right? Not out here, not somewhere external, but you find your internal locus, your internal moral compass, where you can say, I have values and I will speak up if I am supposed to be complicit. And also knowing you maybe misunderstand the situation, because none of us see the major 100% big picture, and we could get it wrong, whatever it is we're seeing. So to stay humble while feeling strongly about something and being very empathetic. Hey, isn't that awesome? So I'm still working on all that, but in theory, I think that's a beautiful destination to try to grow towards. I hope this was somewhat helpful to you and my rambles were not, yeah, I hope I didn't lose you with rambling. What have you experienced? What would you like to share on this subject? Feel free to leave me a comment. I'm happy to address any questions or thoughts that you might have. I think being trauma sensitive kind of prohibits me from saying, hey, like and subscribe my video, though it would help me get what I think is a valuable message out there more. I don't know. You do what you know what to do with social media, right? So whatever you want to do. If this was helpful, feel free to share it. But if you are like, nah, I'm not ready to put my name, attach my name to something like this, I totally get that too. So thanks for listening, and I will chat with you again some other time. Bye.